well, any day that you hear it, or night, or morning, is to ponder the reality of blind spots. And also, as a secondary part of this mission, to go listen to The Divine Maverick. She is wonderful. And it was interesting there. She just uploaded 4 delicious and delightful videos last night or this morning ish, on my time at least. And one of them, I believe, was called like DM Didn't Believe in Love Until You. And there was a part in it, and it's funny because I mean I get all sorts of downloads when I listen to readers that are in my not my wavelength. I don't know what to say. My field of joy, and but it's not often that like I'll listen to something and Spirit will be like, yes, that right there, that's what you need to go talk about. Usually that happens for me with music or the occasional movie I might watch, or while I'm out doing my various driving jobs and stuff like that. And like that's when it'll come in. But this one was like, no. And she talked about just briefly about blind spots. And that was, oh man, it was just like a cascade of downloads, just like a beautiful waterfall with rainbows coming out of it. Like, yes, that's it right there. And it took me a minute, and I was like, okay, guys, like, what is this? Like, what is this, a divine nugget? It's just a little thing, because I'm pretty sure the Maverick covered that. And they were like, no, no, it's more, it's more, it's more. Like, and I'm like going, okay, this feels like it's fitting in with mission messages. And what it feels like is like, okay, the best metaphor I can think at first is when you're driving a car. One of the things that you have to learn, or at least I hope that people make sure you learn, is to be aware of your blind spots. Now, considering that I do a lot of my videos in the car, I'm sitting in the car. So I can see I can see it and I can give you this description. So, like, if you're sitting at the steering wheel and you're looking at your left mirror and then your right mirror, there is a certain amount that you can see there. But if you turn and you look to the right and you look back, and there's usually, I mean, depending on the car that you're in, there'll be like a small triangular window, or it'll be like a post between the door and the back. And that would be the blind spot on your right, to where, like, if you set your mirror a certain way, you can still see that. But most people have the mirrors in at an angle enough to where you cannot see if somebody is like just in the back right corner unless you turn your head all the way around. Now, most people, when you're going to, like, say, lane change, I don't know, I do it because my dad was a bus driver. So I turn all the way around and look like and I've never had any like moving accidents either. So it's probably got to be good. But I know that part of that too is because there's been a couple of times that I've gone to change lanes and I did not do that, and then almost had one of the, had a move, what do they call it, traffic violation, where you're moving in the vehicle when something occurs. And that really taught me to do that. And I've also had some rather niche cars that have some particularly interesting blind spots, like old Jeep Wranglers and things like that, and cargo vans that don't have any windows. Like, think about that too. There's a good example. So, let's say that you have like a cargo van that has no windows in the back of it. You only have the front windshield, the rear windshield, and then the driver passenger windows that are there. Otherwise, you have no windows. That means that you can only rely. This is a much better example, because in a regular car, you can turn around and look. You can do that, right? And in the same thing with the left, a lot of people actually, the funny thing is the worst blind spot is usually on your left, because we have what's called peripheral vision. It's actually not even, the funny thing is, like, this is something that would be good to go and look into, give you a little rabbit trail to go follow and learn about. Your peripheral vision is not actually so much to do with your eyes. It has a lot more to do with your brain and how it brings things in that are away. And like one of my favorite exercises is like put your hands in front of you. I might do this again for with a visual one, but for right now, like put your hands in front of you, right? You can see your hands in front of you. Now take your hands and move them around so that you're going outward towards towards your ears, but away. And see how far back you can put your hands before, if you're looking forward, if you're like take them as far back as you can until you can't see your hands anymore. And what you're going to notice is that there's going to be this weird, bizarre thing that happens when you start to get your hands in a rate, like back behind your ears. You're going to notice there's like the kind of a tipping point in there where you can still see a part of your hands, but you really can't. Like, think about it. And, take your hands far back to where you cannot see them, to where it doesn't even, this is going to be weird to say, it doesn't even feel like you can see them, because this is about helping you recognize that you can feel it. In fact, here, I'm gonna turn this around for a minute. I don't typically do this in the mission messages, and I don't usually do first thing in the morning stuff for messages. Now, so take your hands, right? Put them like this and move them until, let's see. So if I'm doing this, and you want to kind of look forward, because if you're looking down, it's different. Keep your head straight. And I'm going to do this just so, because I have such a small screen. Like, if I take it here, right? Now I can see my hands very well like this, right? Now if I start moving them back, this is where, like, I can kind of see them. And like, so my ears are right here. If my eyes are up here, think about it. How can we see what's back here? The funny thing is you can't see your own ears, right? But like, and this is why this trick is nicer when you have your hands like really far out. But if you take it back, see how far you can go before, like, and there'll be this little space in there where like you can see at least a part of your hands, but you can't really see it, because like think about it. Like, if you go to where the ends of your eyes are, right? Go out there, just do fingers and start to move it back. Like, already, look where my fingers are. I shouldn't be able to see my fingertips at this point, but I can, right? And this is where that line is for me. This is where it goes from like, I can see it, I can't see it at all. I can see it, I can't see it at all, which puts me almost to my ears, right? Can, like, can see, can't see. And all right, I'm going to go back to here. So the thing is, that's kind of your blind spot. And so, as I was saying, like, it's usually actually the driver's side that we have a bigger challenge with blind spots in, because there is often a post for the door right there, no matter what vehicle you're driving. And because it is just out of range of your peripheral vision, that's why so many people can look in their left mirror and like not even be aware that they have a blind spot. To their right there. But then if you turn to look, if you get practiced at it, like me, you turn and you look through the back mirror, the back window behind you, because the mirror to your left can only show you what is behind you. Now, funny enough, I learned because my dad has a big, he like nerds out on peripheral vision. That's why I can talk about peripheral vision like that, because I know a fair amount about it. And my mom has a, it's not macular degeneration and it's not glaucoma, but it is similar to both. And so she also has challenges with the eyes. And so it's interesting to notice now. It's been kind of a theme going on for in my life. And so when you think about that peripheral vision, you can see that you have a literal 3D blind spot, right? You have both on both sides, right? And that also means that pretty much anything behind you is also a blind spot. But here's the thing, you can still feel anything that's within those ranges. You could, like, you could have your hand behind your head. The funner way to do this trick is to have somebody else be the hands that move behind your head, and then have them there, because you can feel your own hand going behind your head. You're not gonna, unless you're really taking something good and not sharing, then it's very unlikely that you're gonna forget that it's your own hand behind your head, right? And we have certain receptors throughout our body. Our skin is an organ of its own kind that our brain recognizes, so it's a little harder to trick there. But if you have somebody else do that with you, you can actually get a more real sense for what your actual peripheral vision is. And you could have them put a hand behind your head with your eyes closed and see, like, have them do the same movement when they take, hands in front of you to coming around, but have them go all the way around behind you to your head. I can almost guarantee you will know, at least if you've been doing your shadow work and you've got a good sensation of your own physical awareness, that you will be able to tell when they have their hand behind your head. And and if you find that you don't, your intuition doesn't pick up on it at that point in time, then maybe do it a little more often, and it can help you see where you can do a little bit more light work for yourself, because you should be able to sense that. And it feels like that was part of the download on it, was the blind spot stuff, and it's actually something that came up that I'm thinking I might go in a little more detail in the members section. It's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and Spirit is, it's taking me through kind of some exclusivity sort of energy, which is, it has in the past not been my favorite energy. So I'm looking at how can, just like everything else, how can I make this more about fun and joy than the way that we typically take it with exclusivity, to where, like, you're not allowed, or these are special secrets. Like, I'm not sure how exactly it's going to go, but I know there's certain information that, like, it was either going to put it on Patreon or have it, waiting for the members section on here. So I might go into a little more detail on some of the. It's not so much like physical peripheral vision, but like, well, that and 5D peripheral vision. But you can learn a lot about the 5D from the 3D if you know about what to look for, approximately what to look for. And it feels like the message, the mission in this is like to explore that stuff, to learn to run both programs, for lack of a better way to put it, to run the 3D program and the 5D program. And it feels like the message is very simply this: Spirit has placed you very, I want to say succinctly, very superlatively, very intentionally in your twin flames blind spots. And it's like, and it's the same with you to them. They put, although I feel like if you're listening to this and or watching this, it's like you're more aware of them. So it's kind of like if okay, it's like the thing with, if you have somebody else put their hand around behind your head, you could still sense that, but you're also aware that you're doing that exercise intentionally to see if you can do that. So even though your twin is also in your blind spot, like, you're aware that they're in your blind spot. Even if you didn't have the words for it, the words that I'm kind of giving you now, you still knew that they were there, right? And your twin, though, depending on, like, I'm not going to say they don't know where you are. They have most of the same, at least inner knowledge, subconscious knowledge as you do. And their 5D being, their 5D self is bringing them up to speed with things. So let's say at least past energies, because, and time isn't linear. So some of this is now, some of this is later, some of this already happened. But they are not quite as, like, 3D conscious of the fact that you're in their blind spot. And so it's like, like I was showing earlier when I flipped the camera around, that, like, there's a line to where you can see your finger, in your peripheral vision, and then right after that line you can't. And it's like you're sitting on the side of the line where you can still see the fingertips. You can still see what they're doing. You can still perceive and see it, even though you shouldn't be able to, because remember what we talked about, like, peripheral vision goes beyond the typical logic of, like, I have two front facing eyes like most predators do. I should technically, if we're just going dry logic and nothing else, only be able to see what's in front of me and what I'm looking at. But not only, for one thing, are our eyes spherical, but we have more sensations going on. I think that's what I was trying to remember to say, is, like, the peripheral vision is not just, it's not just like, oh yeah, so your eyes are round, so you can see a little more. No, there's more to it. That's why you can tell when someone, if somebody else were doing that test with you, you can tell that their hand is behind your head without fast movements, without the wind, without, like, you can test it out any way that you'd like. In general, as long as you don't have a lot of I don't want to say body dysmorphia, but it feels like this might be very helpful for anyone who has a little bit of dysmorphia. But just like a disconnect, there's something that I learned about when I was healing some stuff by learning about the Enneagram and Type 8 stuff, because I'm a Type 8, and we can often get to a place to where we're so used to disassociating from how we feel that we kind of, it's interesting because we don't, how do I even put it? So a Type 8, I'm going to say with uh, anxious attachment trauma types, we're not unaware of how we feel, but it becomes a very dry logical thing. This is why 8 types, and this is past me too, will often seem very blunt, very cutting and cruel, very Queen of Swords type of way, because it's like if somebody comes to you and says, "Well, that person hurt my feelings," like an either an unevolved Type 8 or I want to say a toxic Type 8 will very much be like, "Well, stop hanging out with them." The other person might be like, "But I've known them for 20 years," or "They're my spouse," or this and that, and the 8 type will still be like, "So you're not happy? Fuck them." Like that's very, that's a very thing. But when you start to get into healing and stuff, you could like, you start to recognize that you weren't even connected to how it felt in your body. And I feel like I know that isn't just a Type 8 thing. I know how to communicate it in a Type 8 sort of way because I have that specific reference. But I know like Type 6s have a very similar disconnection between their bodies and their minds, but theirs is often different. And I know I'm not describing this perfectly right. I have delightful friends who would totally correct me. Feel free to correct me in the comments if you're an Enneagram nerd, which I totally love it. Nerd out all you want with me. But like my experience of it is that 6 types, even though they tend to be more logical, they're more caught up in how they feel in their bodies than in the logical sense, which is why like their response to somebody saying like this person hurt my feelings might be like, oh, that feels awful, and like you should, what can you do to feel better, right? Which, the Type 8 thing is like, well, just, cut out the thing that doesn't feel good, whereas the Type 6 way might be more like, well, it's more fight or flighty, but it's like, oh, how can we fix this or how can we avoid the conflict? Or, ooh, that feels scary. Don't go towards that. Or in evolved energy, like, oh, okay, like, where can we seek sources of guidance and to know, the other person a little bit better so that it's safe and we're, not overdoing it. I don't know if I'm explaining it right. Either way, there's often a disconnect. That's this part I'm trying to communicate. There's often a disconnect between what our minds know and what our bodies know. But it's not supposed to be a disconnect. Like when you feel sad, you should also, what I'm going to say is when you're thinking sad thoughts, you should also feel sad in your body. Not a should as in like, don't try to make yourself feel this way, but like a natural response should include the mind and the body, right? And so if you're feeling sad, it would make sense that you feel like, say, heavy in your shoulders. Makes feel like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? Or when you're feeling unsafe, you might eat more comfort foods and feel more hungry because oftentimes we tend to gain weight around the midsection as a kind of subconscious way of protecting some of our stronger energy centers. This is why you'll often see, especially women, but men too, in relationships where they're not very happy, they will gain weight mostly around the midsection, around their dun 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 core. Right? And then the core muscles will soften up and become a place where there's not enough balance strength in there. And a lot of times that happens because we're all up in our minds and we're not actually making the connection between like, oh, when I feel this way, I typically go towards comfort foods. Or when I feel this way, I typically go out and drink. Or when I feel this way, I get sleepy and tired. Or even like when you feel happy, how does that feel in your body? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel more energized? Do you feel a pleasant sensation in your chest? Do you feel kundalini tingly energies? Do you feel, do your feet feel good? Like, I don't know, but like stop and check in with your body when you whenever you feel anything, do it in times when you have big feelings and do it in times when you have small feelings. Like, start to look for the connection between I'm thinking these thoughts that are associated with this emotion. Where do I feel it in my body? One of the biggest ones for me that led me to this path was like when I wanted to interact with my DM, but I was concerned and I was afraid, I still caught in a lot of anxiety. And all I knew is I had this incredible feeling across my chest. It was almost a tightness, but it wasn't. And, and I went through the anxieties of heart attack, but it wasn't that. And then a friend helped me remember something I'd actually looked into a long time ago and forgot I even knew about, which was there's a lot of Eastern philosophies about what various sensations in the body mean. It can connect to reflexology and also like there's so much now. I love meridian work. There are many things you can look into that show you where the lines between just the dry empirical physical body meet and where the energy meets, right? And so the it's so funny. I just had another download pop into my head about somebody that I'm gonna. I think I'm meant to provide some light work, but it was one of those like, and but there's a good example. So like, if I think about somebody, I don't know why. Okay, my guides want me to kind of share this in sort of an anonymous sort of way. So a new friend of mine, brought a friend of hers around, and we were talking about metaphysics and various different sciences. And that person was very adamant that metaphysics means not real. and and I said, actually, let's take a look at that. Because the word science, when you go into its etymology, it says it's an art. So when we're looking at that, the Latin root of the word science means an art. So, like any sort, like, what we typically think of as science is something that is empirical, which means like if I can go and recreate an experiment and have the same results over and over again as that's the 10 people next to me, then it is scientifically considered real, quote unquote. It is considered a part of reality. Though one of the things I've always laughed about is like science, because I have some I have some other friends. I see where the trigger is. Okay, this person reminds me of a cousin that I have. That it's been to my great amusement that like to look for places in science where there's fun to have. Now the cousin is very empirical also, and one of my favorite just arguments to have is that I will say, because there's a science, well, it's a hypothesis that is called the theory of mind, and it's that you cannot there's no way to empirically prove that everyone around you and everything around you is not just a figment of your own imagination. Just kind of trippy. Be careful there. Don't get caught in in what is it called, paradoxical anxiety. But like if you go with that, because you cannot prove it, you can't prove it or disprove it. That's the point of it. Like that's why the person that stated it. And so I take that and I say, you cannot prove to me as an individual that the moon is not made out of cheese. And here is why. Because I have not gone to the moon myself to touch, in some way touch the planetoid, the moon itself and the surface of it, and to verify that it is not made out of cheese. And here's why the argument is valid. Because in empirical science, unless you can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, and have the same experience with it that somebody else has, then it is not valid. And so if you take that to the moon cheese argument, like, yes, I'm aware that the moon is, I'm going to say, very unlikely to be made of cheese. But until I can go there myself and verify it, it is actually very logical to have some sense of skepticism that people will usually say, but they brought back rocks from the moon. Still, I was not there. How do I know that they didn't just go like unearth some really cool unknown mineral from some crater that we assume was from an asteroid and say this is a moon rock? you know? And I know there are plenty of people who are very into the conspiracy that the moon landing was fake. I actually don't believe it was fake. There's some other reasons for it, but I'm not going to yuck on anyone's yum. But to me, it's a valid enough argument to question whether or not things were like that happened because if you're going by empirical science, unless you can personally verify it, then there's always the question of is it really as they say it is, right? And it just what the reason that I love that argument when it comes to those that have are very based in 3D empirical, can I see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, and get the same results with it that someone else does, is that even they are not thinking about one, that sciences are arts, and two, they're not thinking about just how ridiculous and absurd it is to live to where you only ever accept something if it can be like, 3D verified by everybody, because even by their own logic, they are then going by heuristics and trusting things that other people have verified that they never have in their lives. And heuristics is another great thing to know about. It can help you understand yourself and people better, to where when we were, let's say, hunters and gatherers or cave people, if some other tribe came to us and said, "Hey, there is like an overabundance of blueberries just up the hill to the right, and it's totally awesome." Now, at that point in time, you go heuristics is that because they came and told you that there are blueberries up there, if, like, let's say they also tell you that there's a bear's den to the left, you're very likely in that situation with no internet, no anything else, to trust what they say because it's about survival. There is food, you need the food, it's high, it's high energy food, it's good, it tastes good, it's sugary, you don't get a lot of treats like that then. And there's also danger to the left. So even if they were lying, your brain would be very likely to trust that and to at least send some scouts to go look for it, because heuristics is our ability to adapt and survive by taking in information that others have gathered, right? And many creatures on this earth have a very similar way of experiencing things. So we kind of, it's like, it's not a bad part of our brains, but it is definitely one to be aware of, because you can get tricked a lot by your own tendency to follow heuristics. This is where we see a lot of things that turn into like mass hysterias, like with the Great Depression or the current thing with COVID and stuff like that, to where people tend to get more wrapped up into fight or flight because heuristically speaking, it feels safer to trust the masses, even if we have not personally had any experiences that verify or validate what we're being told, you know? And so I think the example that my guides wanted to show is like in that moment when I was thinking about the interaction with my friend's friend. Like, for me, it wasn't even a really big trigger because I've had my cousin with that, and I have my on my dad's side of the family. There's a lot of empiricists. I'm not overly triggered by it. It's just one of those, like, in my mind, it's like, why do I want to spend my time talking with somebody that only believes in like empirical stuff? Like, it's kind of boring. And usually, then, they consider any sort of your arguments to be invalid, and then you're going to reflect and assume their arguments are invalid. It's just like, there's better things I could do with my time. But what I'm recognizing is, what's the feeling in that, because that's what this blind spot stuff is about. This is what, this is the stuff to work out. So my first response, I don't notice, I was not thinking consciously about like what's the physical experience that I had when, it suddenly became, oh, well, metaphysical means it's not real. And then I even brought up and I said, yeah, well, if you look at quantum physics and you look at the boson Higgs, we've actually confirmed and proved a lot of the sciences of magic that have existed for a very, very long time. And even to that he wanted to argue, and I said, yeah, I know there's a lot of empiricists that don't like to take in the knowledge of quantum physics yet, but that's a very similar thing. On top of that, a lot of times, the reason that people will say metaphysics, isn't real is because they have not had the experiences with that. So then it gets rationalized back to the moon cheese thing. If you have not had a personal experience with it, then you did it. And what I pointed out to him too, I said, we have thousands of various different parts on our body and in our brain that can sense thousands of different things going on at one time. Just look at our intuition. That's something, the word intuition, the ability to sense things, you know, it can be taken many different ways. But if you take it just in a physical way, because I'm very fond of knowing all the different angles, I like some amount of empiricism. I just don't treat it like a religion, neither with metaphysics. I don't think either one of them should turn into a dogma, but I do think it's valuable to know about all of them. And so I said, look, we have thousands of different things that we can sense going on around us at any one time and that we know nothing about. And you can look all that stuff up and verify it through empirical sciences. And you're going to tell me that because somebody else said that it was valid and true, that you have all these things and that you can look it up, that you will believe it. But if something happens to you as a person and it's more of, say, a supernatural experience, you're going to toss that out because there isn't somebody else sitting there to say, yeah, that's a real thing. Like the two don't make sense. And then and then I said, and let's look at how many times throughout history that empiricism was wrong and people got stoned or hung or burned at a stake because other people decided that it wasn't real and that must make it scary, and so we must vilify and then get rid of anybody who does not think like us. I mean, Galileo is one of my favorite examples of that one. Like, he got stoned because he talked about the universe being different than what we previously thought it to be, and he was ahead for his times, but the mass society didn't believe in that, and it went against religious dogmas, and so they killed him because he thought differently than everyone else, and he could even verify what he was talking about through the the telescopes that he had created, not created, excuse me, somebody else invented the telescopes, but that he had used. And like, that's a great example of that. And and usually this person, like others, they go, oh yeah, that's true. Like, okay, now let's take the leap into the boson Higgs, which some people also call the God particle. This is one of my favorite things to know about, especially with quantum physics. There's also ghost particles, and Einstein talked about quantum spookiness. There's so many different things that exist in this world on a subatomic level that are all going on at any one time that most people have no idea about. But the boson Higgs is a very particular one. It's one of the smallest subatomic particles that we have ever known. And despite all of the, the world's best geniuses in this field that like could, I don't even know what to say. Like, I'm sure that even how they think about coffee probably would make me feel like I'd have the IQ of a glass of water, and they cannot find a way to observe the boson Higgs in its whatever its natural beginning state is without it being affected by our observation of it. They have even, they've used the, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the big machine that splits atoms apart so you can see what's inside them and things like that. There's a particular name for it, and I cannot remember what it is. It's like a collider. No. Well, yes and no. Like they effectively create kind of a, well, it's not a black hole. This is one of those in my mind. I was like, one of these days they're going to probably create a black hole and they're not going to know what to do with it then. That's why it's dangerous work. But they found the boson Higgs in there, and they have tried to record it with nobody watching the recordings. They have tried, it's like I don't even know. It's like trying to chase your own tail in a weird sort of way, to where you're never gonna get it around. But even when they've recorded it and then left the recording and then come back and then had it, the boson Higgs particle changes whenever it gets observed. And in this way, they've been able to affirm things like when you observe a cloud, it changes. And a lot of people think that they're nuts to think like, oh, I looked at that cloud and it was shaped like a heart, and then suddenly it became shaped like a bunny, and a bunny is really relevant to me. But you think you just push it away and you're just like, Oh, yeah, that's not relevant. But it is because you actually changed it. And clouds are a good example because the particles that come together to make them are a lot less dense than things are down here. Like, right? And then look at things like the experiments where they say if you take, 2 glasses of water. You put them in separate rooms, and one glass of water every day you talk to it wonderfully and nicely, and then the other one you yell at it and you trash talk it. If you then go and look at them on, through a microscope, you can see that the minerals and bacteria, the various little things in the water, have changed depending on the energy you gave it. This is a more real experiment if you do it with apples. Because then you can actually see that the apples that you talked nice to last for longer. They look nicer. The apple that you trash talk rots sooner and turns into crap. This is an example of that sort of thing, of that boson Higgs thing. How we observe something changes it on a subatomic level, right? And it's the same thing with us. So when I'm thinking about interacting with somebody that, like, and once I brought up that stuff too, like that was outside of their knowledge base, which is unfortunately where I often find that people that live in basic empiricism are. They're in their wheelhouse, they're in their comfort zone. It makes them feel comfortable to stay there, which is fine. Though once you start to talk about things that are also being verified and empirically too, that then they start to get a little uncomfortable. It creates what's called dissonance in the mind, which is it's hard to put words to it. That's why they made the word dissonance. But it's like a discomfort in your brain in the logical sense because something is defying your confirmation biases, and your brain is going to be in one place where it wants to accept and take in the new information, but it also wants to stay where it was and not have any information change, because if that information changes, everything might feel like it changes, which it does. But what I'm recalling is now, like, when I'm thinking about, like, let's say a future interaction with not just with that person, but just with anybody that's going to be in that space. Like, I can feel the shadowy sides of me being kind of like, this is a waste of my time. Like, this is not somebody that I'm going to be able to have a higher conversation with. And then, like let's say, what's that first thing in there? It's not disgust. Like, I can feel in my body, it's kind of a tenseness in my shoulders, but it's not an extreme tenseness, and kind of this feeling of like to move away. Like, my old energy would have been to fight it, but my newer energy is simply when an energy does not feel resonant with where I am, I move away from it. Now, to be able to stop and say, okay, I felt annoyed by somebody that was in that space. And then that made me want to move away from the conversation, right? It felt heavy. It was like, okay, I don't want to do that. But in the moment, I was more thinking about what's more fun than this. Like, I'm going to go back to karaoke, or I'm going to go talk to somebody else. I don't typically stay in those places, but that's part of this blind spot awareness, is like, how often do you stop and check in with yourself and say, okay, what's that first feeling that I get and where do I feel it, right? When in the past with the stuff with my DM, to where I'd feel that energy in my chest when I looked it up. Typically, when you feel kind of a pressure or a tension in your chest and you're experiencing an emotion where you're deciding to act or not to act, it's with the energy of bravery, a courageous act. That's what it's normally connected to. And in those times, the choices that I made, whether to act or not to act, were things of courage, right? And going through that helped me get to this point, to where, like, I can make decisions to move away from people that in the past I might not have, because I felt bad for them that they didn't have enough information, or I felt like codependently called to just stay in the interaction and be there because it would be perceived as rude to walk away or something like that. Whereas I'm no longer in that realm to where that bothers me. Like, if it bothers you that I'm walking away from this conversation, that's for you to heal and work on, not for me. But it's nice to have my guides help me slow down a little bit and say, okay, if we look at that now, and and then that initial annoyance change to a different feeling because I've been getting to a place to where in the past I may have said, nope, that's an annoyance. I'm walking away from that because I'm not, my vibration is more important to me than going down in vibration to be able to have a conversation with somebody that I've already had with more than enough people. But then I got out of the energy of being in the I know thing. And I recognized that when there is a trigger in there, that it's intentionally there to show me something, right? To show me something about me, to show me something about others. And that brings me to more of a sense of wonder. And a sense of wonder for me feels like a bit of Kundalini energy in like my lower kidneys area half the time. And well, I know that when I have that sensation, oftentimes it's about some sort of creativity. It's about balance. It's about learning about something. So while I might not necessarily go back for that kind of conversation with that person, that, it's like, okay, why were they in my vibration? And when I start to ask myself questions like that, those thoughts are more satisfying. And that gets into a higher vibration. Like, okay, there's been parts of me, especially in the past. It still happens now, but especially in the past, where like I would have my own convictions about how something was or was not, and then would, in very Capricorn and 8 type fashion, just cut anyone out who didn't fit in with that. And and anyone that I didn't cut out, I would get into typical things for anyone who has attachment or who had or has attachment traumas, and try to prompt them or push them along to know what I know, to see what I see, to act in ways that are in alignment with what I know and what I felt like they should know. And I don't feel that. It feels more like this is one of those, okay, what was the energy that I was in at the time when interacting with that person? I was in a space of I was enjoying myself, yes, though there was still some stuff in the back of my mind about family member stuff, about my DM stuff, about things like that that were very like I'm pretty joyful and comfortable with my twins' journey, but I can still say it's not a journey I would have taken myself because of what I am aware of. And there's a lot of things that I wouldn't do that he has done, but that doesn't mean that I know everything. It doesn't mean that I'm 100% right. In fact, my very argument to somebody like this friend of a friend or to my cousin was that science itself is constantly proving what it knew to be true was wrong. And by its own logic, you can get stuck in logic traps very easily that cut you off from a whole lot of experiences that you would get a great deal of joy from, that would help, alleviate depression, that would help alleviate anxiety, that would help, make the world feel like it's full of opportunities instead of dangers. And it's good that on occasion I get a reality check from my guides by being put in the presence of that. And this is also for me, like going out and getting social locally was something that I avoided for a while. And I know that there's a lot of other twins. I've talked to a fair amount of you, coached some of you who get stuck into that isolation energy because of the potential that you might run into somebody that you don't like or that you don't feel good around, or that wants to interact with you and you don't want to interact with them much, or vice versa, you want to interact with them a lot and they're not that interested in you. And being a very strong empathic, excuse me, being a very strong empath, like for a long time, I also avoided bigger situations because it took a great deal of effort for me to be able to filter all that energy through without becoming all of that energy. And I didn't want to have to do that work. But I also recognize that a lot of my light work is not going to be online. It's not going to be at the house. It's not going to be just between me and my twin. It is time to get out into the world and see what I have learned and where I can shore up some more information and where I can create more joy in various different situations. And for me lately, when I come across somebody that in the past I would have just said, nope, not going there, walking away. Now it's more like, okay, why did spirit put, why did spirit put this person on my path? And, what, why did I call them in? Because we all, we manifest, we rendezvous. And it's like, was I in an energy that could be related to that energy of believing that anything outside of what I believe is true is true. And yes, yes and no. Like, I know that I trust my intuition and that I trust myself and my own knowledge far greater than anything that anyone else could tell me, because I've been doing that work to be able to get there. That's where a lot of people are getting. However, that there is just as much of a trapping in that as there is somebody who's trapped in empiricism. And it's one of those, like, you want to be unfuckwithable in the sense of, like, let's say with your twin flame, that you're aware that the love is there, that everything is already working out, that all that stuff's in there, and you do want to filter your vibration so that you don't have a whole bunch of people telling you you're wrong, or that you can think that you're crazy about it. You don't want that, but you also don't want to cut everybody out. And some amount of that experience is going to be stuff that only you can know, that only you can know. And the only way that it manifests is if you trust that knowing, and you trust it in a positive way, you know? And so sometimes that is the key. And it's, spirit uses your twin flame to be able to show you how to do that with other things too. And it's quite simply, like, people who don't believe in magic don't see any. It could be happening all around them and, right under their noses all the time, and they would never see it because they don't believe in it. And even if they had an experience that, in every other way seemed verifiable, if they felt like it was a magical experience, they would automatically go to a low self-worth place and say that they thought they were crazy. But when you believe in magic and you know that that is true, and there's nothing that anyone can say or do that can remove that faith from you, then you see magic everywhere. But here's the thing, like, it it's fine. It's fine to have either. You want to be an empiricist, fine. Be an empiricist. I have no problem with that. Though, like, the same thing can happen on both sides. Somebody who is only an empiricist will never really see magic. They'll never really believe in miracles. They'll never really have that stuff because empiricism is so 3D. But the same thing is true to where if you're like only 5D, if you're only all about, religion, dogma of any kind, which can include magic and spiritual paths, you can get stuck there too. And then you don't, then you're completely at odds with anything empirical, you know? And you want to be careful of that because that's where you can get these blind spots. And then people, things, and various different lessons can hide in your blind spots, right? So I said all that to say, apparently, that by learning about yourself, this is your mission in this, by learning about yourself and connecting how you feel to how you feel in your brain with your emotions, and how does that energy of that emotion translate to feelings in your body, and then feelings in terms of, do you want to act? Do you want to fight? Do you want to fly? Do you want to fly? Do you want to run? Do you want to hide? Do you want to keep talking? Like, think about, make those connections in there between, I thought this thought, I felt this feeling, it felt this way in my body, and it made me feel like I wanted to do ABC. And once you can start to recognize those things, you can recognize, like, right now, I'm aware that because I've been in a space of practicing that, rather than trying to convince anybody of anything, or trying to be like, oh, you poor thing, you don't understand what's going on, and I'm gonna, like, take you under my wing so that you can be helpful, which is, I haven't done a ton of that in my life. I'm mostly aware of other people that have been very close to me that do that with a lot of people around them. But, like, rather than that, it's simply been, oh, this is an uncomfortable energy, I'm going to move away from it. And actually, that's a very joyful experience for me. It's quite fun to just be like, oh, that doesn't feel like a good energy, I'm going to move over there. And, like, I could have a great time sitting by myself anywhere, and I know that. And so it's very freeing to be like, I don't have to worry about not being in the in crowd. I don't have to worry about anybody thinking I'm weird or not weird. I don't have to worry about anybody feeling like they're offended, because I'm not concerned with it. And I'm not doing anything from a space of wanting to offend anybody or wanting to exclude anybody. It's simply, my energy feels lighter over there, so I'm going to go over there. you know and but can be blind spots that can hide in there. There could be information that I could get about a friend or a loved one or my twin flame that I would not be open to receiving because it might come, or at least in the past, I wouldn't have been open to receiving because it might have come from a source that I wasn't thrilled with. And so, and a lot of people do that. Like, if you don't like the source, you're not going to listen to the information. We can see this happen a lot with, like, I'm very, I'm not gonna say I'm very libertarian in terms of like the actual political party because I've been involved with it, but I'm very libertarian in the small L way, and especially with minarchy. And I believe there's a balance because freedom is absolutely necessary, though there are a lot of us, and it is good to be able to have kind of a basic set of guidelines that we follow that everybody at least attempts to agree on. And the problem is, though, like, so many people get stuck in either they absolutely love government and they love the authority of it, the heuristics in them is just like, oh yes, mama, give me more of that. And then they don't like anybody that provides any sort of data that might counter something that their preferred political party or government agency says is wrong, then they automatically put everybody else in a category of, no, you're a conspiracy nut, or you're a fanatic, or whatever, slur and slight that you might put in there. And then on the other side, when you get more towards anarchy, there people are very anti-government. Nothing the government ever does, it's all completely bad. There's never in there, but neither are true. Neither are true. There is good and bad, shadow and light, heaviness and ease to all things. And a lot of it depends on the people in the positions manifesting things. And it also depends on you and how you perceive it. And the same thing can happen to where spirit might put some people on your path, either some third parties or some soulmates or family members that trigger you a lot. And they might actually be an incredible source of knowledge, incredible wealth of knowledge for you on your particular journey. But if you're not willing to listen to them, to listen to their conversation, if you're not in a place where you can listen to them, be aware of what you observe as biases or contradictions or things like that without getting spun out. If you're not in a place where you can be emotionally stable and not feel like your whole world has been rocked because they don't believe like you do, you're just going to move away from them and you're going to miss extra opportunities. So for me, it's like, a lot of people, when they want to manifest money, will immediately go to the lottery, which is not bad. It's simply very limiting. And part of the challenge, too, is that everybody's aware of what the lottery is. And so it's like this, it's a collective manifestation. And the way that we think about it, oftentimes when we go towards the lottery for manifesting things, the problem is we don't believe there are any other ways that money could come to us in a benevolent way, like without having to lie, cheat, steal, or somebody dies and you get a bunch of money. Like, there are infinite ways to manifest money, but we get into negative thinking about what money is or what the energy of it is, and we often think that what we want is the money, when in fact what we really want is the freedom, ease, and satisfaction that comes along with always having more than enough money. But when we get into trying to just manifest extra money from the lottery or from our taxes or from, from some source that feels like is more of a, it's funny to think of the lottery, more of a guarantee of some kind, like we get stuck. We limit ourselves because there are so many different ways. Like, if you go for a, like, you pick one place every day to go walk that is different from where you typically are, you might see a really cool feather that you'd never see anywhere else. That to me is, that's a treasure. That's a wealth, right? Or you might see somebody has painted something or carved something into a tree that, gives you a message about your journey. If you go to a banquet, a karaoke night, a painting, as was it, wine and painting night. If you go to these different things and you have these different experiences, you could unlock all sorts of information. Heck, you might find $20 on the ground in every one of these places that you go. That's a way that money could come to you. And a lot of people just don't think about that. Finding money on the ground, money that nobody has any attachment to, enough money that it's like, if somebody's missing it, it's not that big of a deal. And you could even go ask somebody, has somebody lost any money? Everybody says no. Okay, there it is, it's for you, right? Or you might have a friend who, let's say you have a friend who wins the lottery and they love you and they're like, here's $1,000 just because they fucking love you. That's another way that money could come to you. And I think the point in going into that is that like Spirit wanted this to be a twin flame mission message, because this is about your connection with your twin and it's about your light work. You may be limiting yourself because what's outside of your peripheral vision, you're not even thinking to look for it. One of my favorite questions to ask myself, and that I always suggest other people do, is think about a thought you've never thought of before. Another one is, what is it that I don't know that I need to know? You can ask Spirit for that. Show me what I don't even know that I need to know. Or I don't know that I don't know that I need to know. You can take a step there too. Because what we know is often a very small piece of the pie diagram compared to what we don't even know that we don't know that we need to know. And that is that blind spot area. We get stuck in what we know, and we cut ourselves off from the infinite. I'm not even joking. Like, that's a literal sense of the infinite amount of stuff that we could know. And if we limit ourselves only to talking to people that feel good, or only talking to people that we're fairly sure won't hurt us, or only talking to people when we feel like they're in a good mood, or, things like that, we cut ourselves off from all sorts of information that we could allow in. Just like when we learn about the peripheral vision and we get into learning about different topics like that, we become aware of just how many ways that just our body alone and our brain, like the 3D, can pick up that we didn't even know that we had. Like, have you ever thought about why you don't roll off the bed when you sleep? Like, there's a part in the brain, I believe it's in the amygdala, it's a balance center that can feel the change in pressure when you are in, not necessarily in the middle of the bed, but when you're in your comfort space on the bed versus what it feels like when you get to the energy and the airspace of the end of the bed. And, unless you have an ear infection, you typically will not roll off the bed. Or I don't know if you're doing intoxicants and some sort of thing, but unless there's something that, directly affects that part of the brain, then you will not roll off the bed. Or maybe in an earthquake. I've had one of those happen. But even at that, that's what woke me up, because my brain was like, whoa, hey, something weird's happening. Either way, there are a lot of things and a lot of experiences and stuff that you can have that can help expand your peripheral vision. I know some people that through, practice with it, have trained it so that they can actually see their hands go almost behind their head, and they can have it verified by optometrists that they have a very extensive peripheral vision. So the same, and anyone can do that, barring, let's assume that you're not, I wouldn't say legally blind, but like you're not like blind that way, but you should still, like, even when you lose that sensation, think about that. When, throughout history, when people have lost a major sensation, all of their other senses pick up and can do the same stuff that used to be done by one particular set of organs, like your eyes or your ears, things like that. And what Spirit wants you to do is to start looking for your blind spots, because it's in those blind spots that Spirit is holding your twin in there, because there's things that you're not aware that you do, that you think that you're avoidant of, that you keep your own self stuck in, just like your twin keeps themselves stuck in. And as you learn to go through and expand your senses and expand your mind and expand your spiritual experience, guess what? They're going to reflect you, and they're going to be able to do the same thing. And they're going to start seeing, and in fact, this is already happening with my twin, because I've been doing this for a little while, is that he's starting to recognize that there are a lot of things that he was not aware of about me before, because, and he couldn't have been until we went through the experience of the separation mission. And the same thing is true of, like, being able to tell the difference between when people are like lying about me or making things up, or when his own mind and fear is doing those things versus the reality of me. But he wouldn't have known that unless we'd gone through these experiences. And the same thing for me with him. And those experiences are there to help teach you to be able to work with others in doing your light work and doing your own light work. Because to me, light work isn't, you're not like going around and like healing people. Light work is your ability to be light and to be yourself and to be like just a beautiful energy. And that people, when they are in your presence, are changed by that. Usually in good ways. So sometimes people need to go to a shadowy place. So if you trigger them, don't beat yourself up. That was their journey. That's what they needed. And that's fine, you know? But start looking in those blind spots, like, which is weird to say, like, like look for where your peripheral vision is. Think about your blind spots in the car, and then start to take that to a place where you're looking at what are my blind spots spiritually, what are my blind spots emotionally, and what are the things that I can work on about me, that I recognize, that I look at my twin and say, well, they should be acting this way, or they shouldn't be acting this way, or they should just know this, or, like observing them and making a judgment that they should change something. They're just 99% of the time, what you're actually seeing is your own reflection coming towards you, in that way, and it's there. Like if you're noticing that your twin is being very robotic, let's say, then the sorry, I'm getting a couple of texts. Like if you're noticing, okay, thank you for coming back to me, Spirit. If you're noticing that you are in a space of only hanging out with certain people that you feel are safe, like, see how there are so many different blind spots that you have. If you're stuck in a certain loop in your mind, oh, that's what it was. If you see your twin, like, say that they're continuing to hang out with people that, that you feel are not compatible with them, or they're toxic, like third parties that are not good for them, stop and take a look at yourself. How many connections do you have that are like that with your family? Or vice versa. Are you only hanging out with people that you're positive or safe for you, and not meeting other people? Because it could be that through meeting other people, you might actually realize that some of the connections that you had that you thought were the safest were actually quite codependent. They might not have been toxic per se. Codependency typically is toxic, but you might have had a milder experience of the same thing, that you're looking at your twin and going, well, they should know better. Well, how come you shouldn't know better? How come it's okay for you to stick with people that you feel are safe, and not go out and meet new people, not go out and make new friends, not put yourself outside of your comfort zone? Because a lot of times what we look at our twins and we judge what they're doing, we're asking them to come out of their comfort zones, but we're not willing to do it ourselves. And if you start to look for where are your blind spots, where's your spiritual peripheral vision? Where's your physical peripheral vision? You can start to see where you're reflecting. And that's where you get the work. You don't get the work by telling them all day long what they're doing wrong. They're aware that they're doing things wrong. That's usually why they get stuck in those toxic cycles, because they feel like they're going to fuck it up anyways. And by you sitting there telling them how they're still fucking it up, guess what you're confirming for them? And that's a reality that they're manifesting. But you can change the game. You can change the game pieces. You can change the whole freaking reality of it and jump onto different timelines if you can get yourself to where you can recognize that the real work is within. That whenever you feel like there's something that they could be doing better, that's something you could be doing better. And the minute that you actually enjoy that process, that you don't feel triggered by that process, and that you're like, this is delightful. Thank you, twin, for pointing out for me another space where I can work on me. When you can get to that space, then you start to change the game, and they start to reflect you in that way, because that is a much higher vibration than the, oh my gosh, why aren't they with me? What aren't they doing? And why aren't they changing? Why aren't they changing so I feel like I can change? Why aren't they changing so I can feel loved? Why aren't they changing because they're doing the worst thing, or it's a bigger thing than the mild reflection that I have? No, stop it. Because energy works in a different way than empirical stuff does. Like I may have, oh, let's see. I'm trying to think of an example of it. Okay, let's just take the same example. I ran into somebody that it kind of pushed a few smaller buttons of old me stuff, right? And in in my experience, it was a mild experience. It was not much there. But because energy, it works differently, it may be that in that moment of one going, I'm going to move away from this energy because it's uncomfortable. And then the second moment, which was after and then is also happening now, in thinking about what more could that experience have meant other, like, rather than being like, oh, that person's just stuck and annoyed and I'm just going to like put them in that place and keep them there. Instead, now I go to a place of like, what is the potential learning opportunities, healing opportunities that I can see in this experience that I had. Now, for me, that's so practiced and so normal for me now that it's a very mild experience. But I'm aware that my twin, in his experience, that could be a more inflated, expansive experience. It may be that he was having a very intense debate with somebody, and instead of deciding to continue being stubborn and prideful and continuing the fight, that he goes, you know what, I'm not going to fight, I'm going to walk away. And then instead of him, like he might go more towards a place of like, I don't want to talk to that person at all because I had a bad experience. But there's a part in him that's starting to recognize how many people that he calls around him that bring conflict or drama. And then that experience, whereas I just went, I wonder, could spirit be trying to show me something about me or about my twin or about somebody I'm working with? Could there be a message in there in this? Or could it just be that maybe my presence in this person's life will help them feel a little bit lighter? That for my twin could resonate into something just like, you know what, I'm going to forgive this person because, they don't know what they don't know, and I see a little bit more, and I am going to move away from this experience because it's not good for me, but I'm not going to hold on to hate in my heart for them like I used to. And even if that's just a very small thing for him to start thinking about that, that's a beautiful seed that has been planted and already starting to grow. And so I know that every time that I put myself in a new situation, which is something that he's been far more afraid of than I have, that every time that I do that, something happens with him, a corresponding reaction. Not reaction, a corresponding energetic connection in there. And so when I'm more focused on me and just like, what do I want to do? Where's my comfort zone? How can I, get out of my comfort zone? How can I learn to be in a good space with any energy? How can I find a way to do this for me and not for union, not for what other people think, not for saving or rescuing him, just for me, because those are the experiences that change the game. When you're doing stuff just because you want union or just because you want to be seen or just like for 3D things, and that they're not just like cherries on top, that's when you notice that you get inconsistent manifestations because you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for them, or you're doing it for trying to fill a hole that is in that is meant to be filled by you. Whereas when you're going out and creating new adventures, allowing yourself to follow your divine inspiration, when you're doing it because you love yourself and you know that you're going to have a good time no matter where you go, no matter what you do, things like that, that changes the game. Because guess what, most of your twins are not doing the things that you feel like would affirm their love for you and stuff like that, because they're afraid to try new things. They're afraid to get out of their comfort zone. They feel safer in the known toxicity of the past than they do in the potential upliftment and light work and joy in the new. And if you are reflecting that, then you're both just going to stay there until one of you figures it out, you know? All right, it's been over an hour. I'm amazed that this topic even went on that long, but thank you so much for those of you that listen. Please comment below if there's anything that didn't make sense or that just brought you a ton of joy or that you want to add to it. I love interacting with all of you. All right, I will see you in the next video or channeling or fun thing that we get into.